Well, pretty frustrating day at the Big House in Ann Arbor. The Ohio State Buckeyes losing for the first time since 2011 to the Michigan Wolverines, 42-27. It's a game that has a lot of people pretty upset. Obviously, the outcome isn't what you wanted to see, but beyond that, 6 rushing touchdowns against Ohio State on a day that they never threatened to stop the run. Pretty tough day. We're going to break it down for you in our instant analysis post-game show live from Michigan here on Buckeye Breakdown.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State
with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today.
Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
Well, good Saturday evening, everybody. I'm Brendan Gulick along with Andrew Lind for BuckeyesNow on Sports Illustrated. And this was certainly not the day that Ohio State envisioned. Unfortunately, when you play a game with big stakes like this, where everything is right in front of you if you win, and if you lose, things come crashing down in a heartbeat, there's a chance that the season could essentially not totally come to an end. The Buckeyes are going to play in a bowl game, but my goodness, the outlook of the college football playoff is extremely minimal now, in addition to the fact that Ohio State loses to Michigan for the first time in a decade. Andrew, this is a tough one to swallow because Ohio State, frankly, they got outplayed, outgunned. They were less physical. Michigan kind of kicked their butt today.
Yeah, and a week ago at this time, we were talking about, Ohio State being able to beat Georgia. And, after the Michigan State game last week, them shutting down Kenneth Walker and keeping him to a season low, they kind of laid out the blueprint of we're going to stop Michigan today. And for everything that went well last week, everything did not go well in the run game this week. So, yeah, like you had mentioned, coming into a game like this 2 weeks in a row where everything's on the line, win, you advance, go to the Big Ten championship. It's just kind of one of those things. I think that they just were not Michigan was the more physical team today. They seem to want it more defensively. Ohio State, to me, and I said this on Twitter, it really seemed like Cam Brown and Bryson Shaw were really the only people on the defense who seemed to really care that they were just getting gashed left and right, and the only people who were trying to make a bit of a difference. So, obviously it's a disappointing loss for Ohio State. It's been a while since Michigan has been able to feel good coming out of this. And then obviously Jim Harbaugh after the game is feeling really well. So really good about himself and his team. So, from a rivalry standpoint, this is a great thing. From an Ohio State standpoint, it's obviously
not. I think maybe we should hit this right off the top. When a rivalry becomes as one-sided as Ohio State, Michigan has been now for basically 2 decades. The Buckeyes have only lost twice in the lifetime of most of these players coming in. They were 17-2 the last 19. And of those 2, one was an awfully long time ago. They had won 15 of the last 16 coming into this game. I don't know if it necessarily lessens the impact of the feeling in the fan base of a rivalry that is as deeply rooted and strong as this one is. But I do wonder if, somewhere along the way, and again, I am trying to put, a reasonable spin on this. I'm trying to wonder if, sometimes you need to lose a game to remember just how much it hurts to lose. These guys for a long time haven't lost to Michigan, and they've performed extremely well in this game. They've blown Michigan out. They've won really tight contests. Nobody at Ohio State wants to lose this game by any stretch of the imagination. But I do wonder if that stark reminder of how much today hurts will be good for a team that, frankly, has a lot of young players that have come a long way as this season's gone on. It just really stings in the meantime because the Buckeyes, as the number 2 team in the country, with an offense that looked unstoppable, certainly felt like a team, maybe still do feel like a team that could win a national title. It just doesn't look like that's going to happen anymore.
Yeah, and I think last year not having a game, obviously, that put some separation between those people who did play in the game previously. There there was only a handful of players today for Ohio State that had actually started in that game 2 years ago, and even fewer, obviously, who even played at all. So it makes you kind of wonder, like, if they, because Ohio State is a young team, like, do they really understand what the rivalry is? Because they haven't been around it. It's 700 and some odd days is a long time to not be around it. And even though they say, live at 365 days a year, and there's obviously a very big impact on how they do everything. Coming out of this game, it seemed like Michigan wanted it more. We kind of poke fun at Harbaugh and this and that when he said back in the summer that they didn't want red Gatorade in the facility. That they were finally taking the rivalry seriously. That they put up a beat Ohio State sign in the weight room and those kind of things. So, we kind of took that for granted. But I think that it kind of shows. Maybe Ohio State did get a little comfortable with how things have gone in this rivalry and kind of took it as just, it's an afterthought. It's going to happen. And then Michigan, punched them in the mouth today, and they didn't really have a response for it.
David's comment about this game being lost at the line of scrimmage, I wholeheartedly agree with. Frankly, on both sides of the ball. Michigan's offensive line, I mean, if you run the ball 41 times for 297 yards, you have some really tough short yardage situations that you win, and you break off a couple of big runs. They straight up bullied Ohio State's defensive line today. And on the other side of the ball, I mean, goodness gracious, how many pre-snap penalties can you have? I think it's fair to at least point out that C.J. Stroud said post-game, hey, look, I've been sick all week. You could hear it in his voice. He had no voice. And I'm sure some of that's because he was screaming in a stadium with 111,000 people. But, maybe he just didn't have it. I mean, maybe DeJuan Jones and Nick Petit-Frere and Thayer Munford, who all had false start penalties, maybe they just couldn't hear the cadence every single time. What was most frustrating was that it felt like those penalties came at super critical times where Ohio State was starting to get something going. And then all of a sudden, the 8-yard gain just turned into a 5-yard, loss after the penalty. So instead of 2nd and 2, now it's 2nd and 7. It felt like there was no ability to get anything going because of that. And I have to think that the Buckeyes are kind of taking this one on the chin up front. It was not the best day for Coach Studd's group.
Yeah, and as someone who doesn't feel particularly great myself right now, I think I got a little bit of the flu. I know how difficult it is to go out there, and scream and yell and try to talk when you don't really have a voice. So, I don't really place any blame on TJ. It's very difficult to get behind schedule. They talk about it a lot, like at Nebraska and against Penn State. The offensive line had very similar issues. And when you're turning a 3rd and 2 or, a 2nd and like 4, getting a false start, and then you're in 3rd and long again, like those aren't easy things to convert, and you need to stay on schedule and be able to get those things. So, it was very similar to the Oregon game in that respect. Ohio State scored 28 in the Oregon game, 27 in this game. And I think it's just a matter of staying on schedule. Like I said, I don't really blame CJ. He was hitting the receivers. Like there was a couple plays where, honestly, he was under pressure for a lot of the game too. Obviously, Hutchinson and Ojabo, are great defensive ends and really took advantage of the fact that Ohio State really couldn't get a consistent snap count down. I know, if you're struggling snapping the ball and you're sitting there and, oh, well, we don't want to do any additional counts because we want to make sure we even get the ball off in the first place, they're going to jump all over that. They're going to pin their ears back the very first thing they hear and they're gone. So, DeJuan Jones and NPF, they struggled today in that aspect. Luke Whippler, once again, struggled with snapping the ball and being consistent with that. And that really just puts the offense at a disadvantage.
I think it's a good point by Perry that the offense, for whatever reason, a couple of times this year, the point totals weren't great. But I would point out that, the total offensive yardage in those games shows that the team was still moving the football. I mean, geez, the Buckeyes today, even on a day where they had to settle for field goals in the red zone a couple of times, they still had 458 yards of offense. That's
Well, it appears we lost Brendan here. But I think what he was kind of saying, I'll try to carry this while he's gone. I think what the point he was making was the fact that, Ohio State still racked up a large amount of offense. It's obviously not enough to turn to, have 2 field goals in the red zone. Obviously, if they score touchdowns in those situations, it might be a different game. But I do really think that, to his point, the offense is still able to go and do their own thing. So a lot of that really does fall upon the defense. It seemed like, especially toward the end of the game, when they really needed a stop, they really couldn't. They were even loading up the box. They were basically asking Michigan to throw it against them, and they were still getting the yards needed. And that was especially obvious on the last run of the game, or the last drive of the game. So like he was saying, it's a very difficult loss for Ohio State. Obviously, we'll try to have more on that. We'll get Brendan back, but for now, I'm Andrew Lind, signing off for Brendan Gulick.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State
with our instant analysis from Ohio State's.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today.
Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We back here, guys?
I think we're still live.
Yeah, I think we're good here. The broadcast is still live, so we can continue on here chatting. I've tried to change cameras. I'm not sure. I think the internet connection probably not 100%. Look, the point I was making was that I'm not really ready to lay the loss entirely at the feet of the offense, because if you have closing in on 500 yards of offense, that's not a terrible day. But the reality is, when you lose a game like this, it's a full team loss, and I think everybody plays a part in that. The physicality, probably the thing that bothered me the most. I'm disappointed by the way Ohio State played in the trenches, because I think they got pushed around, and I'm not going to say they didn't fight back. I thought the team did fight back, frankly. It just wasn't enough.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I think that with some of the defensive players obviously kind of fought back. Came Brown and the guy's helmet off because he wouldn't let him go. Those kind of things. Those are the things you expect from this game. And it just seemed like once Haskins was getting going, it wasn't seem like anybody was frustrated. Nobody was getting in each other's faces. Nobody was saying, we need to get this corrected. I didn't really see it on the sidelines, anything like that. So, it just makes you wonder, like you had kind of mentioned before, were they really into this game as much as they should have? And obviously, there could be outside factors. C.J. Stroud talked about how he was sick, after the game. Those kind of things go into it. But really, what it comes down to is the defensive faults today are the reason that they lost this game. Because I think that, if you sit there and you put up 27 points, that's typically enough to win. I mean, 4 years ago, they won 30-20 in this game. Michigan, this is the most Michigan has scored in like 70 years in this rivalry game. So, for to still, put up those kind of points, like they would have been, and I can't really fault the offense in that respect.
Yeah, I feel the same way. The season's not over, but it's the first time in a while that it kind of feels like it. It's the nature of the playoff system we've created, where if you don't make the college football playoff and you're a team that regularly does, the Rose Bowl doesn't feel as special as it used to, or the Peach Bowl, or whatever. I mean, it just, it's hard to feel like this is a day that the Buckeyes can build on. This is going to hurt for a while. And I'm telling you, man, the whole second half, I felt sick to my stomach, because I don't think Ohio State thought this was even possible, that they would get punched in the mouth like this. It's always possible that you'll lose. You respect your opponent because they're capable of – look, you're talking about a team that was ranked number 5 in the country, okay? They don't stink. But I just genuinely don't believe that Ohio State thought this kind of an outcome was really even in the realm of possibilities. I know I didn't. I thought Ohio State was going to cover the spread easily. My final score prediction was was almost exactly what it was, but flipped. I said 45-24. I think the thing that most disappointed me today was Ohio State's, lack of success in the run game defensively, because with the exception of the first 2 games of the year, Andrew, the Buckeyes really haven't had anybody run it on them all year long. And, I don't know if it's a pride thing. I don't know if it's a scheme thing. I mean, obviously Michigan was playing with an edge and their offensive line played great, but there was no pressure all day. The Buckeyes did not record a single tackle for loss, not one. Cade McNamara, when he threw it, got the ball out of his hands quickly. It was not Ohio State's best performance from a physicality standpoint. I think that's what disappoints me the most.
Yeah, I think you made a couple of really good points there too. You go from thinking that Ohio State's going to play maybe 3 more games after this to now it's a consolation trip to the Rose Bowl, which, don't get me wrong, a trip to the Rose Bowl before the playoff, that would have been the dream for how many, people. If you don't make it to the national championship, if you're not one of those 2 teams that made the BCS national title game, to go then and represent the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl against a Pac-12 opponent, that's something that, my parents and my grandparents will talk about as something that they rooted for as Ohio State fans. And now it just feels like a disappointment. You're starting to wonder, are there going to be players who don't play in that game because they have NFL futures, those kind of things. I know Ohio State didn't really deal with that in 2018 in Urban's final game. I know that, there was a lot of players who decided that it was important. They spoke about the brotherhood and all that kind of stuff. But those are questions that we're now facing. Is there going to be NFL draft declarations, those kind of things? And, 6 hours we're wondering, hey, where are we staying in Indianapolis, for the Big Ten championship game next week? And, that's obviously out the window. And then, to your point about just it being an unexpected thing, you could see that. I thought even in the third quarter, I'll say, I'm watching a game here at home with my father-in-law, and I told him, I said, I kind of expect Ohio State to, kind of put things together like that. That had kind of just been the thing that they had done all season, kind of struggle a little bit in aspects, and then everything would start clicking. And that really just never happened today.
The point I think I was making, I just remembered that when our stream cut out there for a second, was about third downs for Michigan. In the first quarter, they were 4 for 4 on third downs, and you could really tell, they were dictating things. Their game plan was basically being executed. Keep Ohio State's offense off the field by just having long drives and eating clock. And it sure helps when you finish those drives with scores. What was remarkable to me was that after converting all 4 third downs in the first quarter, the Buckeye defense stiffened a little bit in that second quarter, and Michigan was 1 for 4 on third downs in the second quarter. So they were 5 for 8 in the first half. They didn't have another third down offensively the entire game, not one. Their second half drives, touchdown, 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 end of the game. Literally, they moved down the field in short spurts on a couple of those drives. They had the 3-play 81-yard drive, 5-play 78 yards, 966, and then 5-play 63 yards. But they never, they never really even were threatened from being taken off the field. And I don't know what happened to the Ohio State defense in the second half that they couldn't come up with a stop. Bryson Shaw was clearly pretty emotional in that post-game press conference, and he used the word embarrassing. It is embarrassing. They didn't play very well, and this is a tough loss. But by the same token, I kind of circle back to what I said at the beginning. Today sucks, and it's going to suck for a while. And Ohio State fans are going to remember this, and this team is going to remember this until they meet next year. But the reality is, I think, and I felt this way before the game even started, when you have a rivalry that's as one-sided as this one has been for a while, sometimes it can be beneficial long-term to remember just how hard it hits, how deep it cuts when you don't play well. Ohio State played okay, but they certainly didn't play well enough to beat a top 5 team in the country today. And I think after obliterating Michigan State last weekend and hanging 49 on them in the first half, I think everybody sort of felt like this isn't going to be that big a deal. Michigan State beat this team, and Ohio State was not nearly strong enough to beat Michigan today.
And I'm glad that you made that point, because I was kind of thinking earlier. It reminds me a lot of, when they got beat by Clemson in the 2016 Fiesta Bowl, and then just the struggles that they had in 2018 defensively that led to the loss at Purdue. You have those specific games where it forces you to reassess things, whether that's making defensive changes like they did in 2018. I know they made offensive changes after the 2016 season, which is why Ryan Day came to Columbus in the first place. So it's kind of one of those things like, Ohio State's not used to it happening against Michigan, though. So I think that only adds an even more, interesting layer to it. Is now it's, we didn't lose to Purdue, we didn't lose to Clemson. We can't sit there and say, these are just one-off kind of things. Like, this is the team that you cannot afford to lose to, and they just beat you in every single way. And now you have to get back up off that mat and figure out how to beat them next year.
Maybe what bothered me the most about the way Michigan ran the ball so successfully today is the fact that it was basically the Hassan Haskins show. Mm-hmm. And throughout the course of the year, it's been their balance between him and Corum. And then obviously what Donovan Edwards did in the passing game last week against Maryland caught a lot of people's attention. But I mean, today it was all Hassan Haskins, man. 28 carries for 169 and 5 touchdowns with a long of 27 yards. I mean, most of his yards were pretty tough. Blake Corum had the 55-yard run, so 55 of his 87 came on one carry. But Hassan Haskins, I mean, he's not that big of a back. If you're a Buckeye fan, you probably look at what Ohio State's got in the backfield and say, rather have Travion Henderson, rather have Mayan Williams. But Hassan Haskins today did something that has literally never been done by a Michigan player in this series history. At 5 rushing touchdowns. You tip your cap to the kid for having a good day. But I think what was most frustrating to me was the fact that, when he was on the field, you pretty much knew the ball was going to go to him most every play, and it didn't matter.
Yeah, and after last week, them shutting down Kenneth Walker, I really didn't think that Michigan was going to be able to get any of its running game going, whether it was going with Corum or Haskins. Obviously sprinkling Donovan Edwards in there in the pass game, and I'd say that catch he made out of the backfield with one hand was probably one of the better catches I've seen this year. But like you said, it was really the Hassan Haskins show, and for him to score 5 touchdowns in this game, like, he's going to be remembered for a long time because of that. And it just kind of blows my mind. And like you said, it's kind of a frustrating thing because you knew what Michigan was going to bring into this game. Ohio State just shut down an offense that was equally reliant, or if not more reliant, on the run last week, and it was a complete opposite this week.
There's a couple of interesting things in the comments section we should address. One of them is the interior of the defensive line. I was a little surprised Haskell Garrett was not on the field to start the game today. With as well as he's played lately, I just thought it was interesting that Vincent and Cage were the 2 starting defensive tackles. I remember one play in particular where Antoine Jackson had a pretty bad missed tackle. And I just don't remember Haskell Garrett making a huge impact on this game today. That's disappointing because I think Ohio State's interior defensive line has largely had a good year. I'm not even sure if Tyleik Williams played. If he did, he didn't do anything that jumps off the page at you. This was really disappointing from Larry Johnson's group, which is so abnormal. I mean, that's just never the case. And today they got handled.
Well, and it seemed like up the middle too was a lot different. I noticed Tommy Eichenberg wasn't in there as much either, and they relied a bit more on Cody Simon today, which was a surprise because Tommy Eichenberg is coming off what was probably the best game of his career, again in a situation where it was against a team that was going to run the ball. So, I'm definitely kind of confused by the defensive, scheme today, just their idea of how to best handle this Michigan attack.
The other thing that I saw in here that is an interesting thought, if Georgia beats Alabama and Alabama comes up with a second loss, Ohio State has 2 losses. what are the chances that maybe those two teams play against each other in a bowl game? That could be kind of fun. I don't know if that's something I want to think too hard about at the moment, John, but I do think that could be a somewhat entertaining idea, and maybe a game like that could be really beneficial for the Buckeyes, because look, if you're not going to win the national championship, everything has to be about building to win the national championship, next year. You've got a guy who, may or may not win the Heisman Trophy, a quarterback. He's having a great season, obviously, but obviously, it's not going to end the way he wants. Travion Henderson, a true freshman running back that has a boatload of talent and is going to be around for a while, at least a couple more years, right, before he would turn pro. Your offensive line is going to turn over a bit. I mean, I don't want to go through the whole position group by position group, but you've got a lot of young players that are going to be coming back. Maybe if you play against a team like an Alabama, who has been the measuring stick in college football for a while now, maybe a postseason bowl game against them could do the Buckeyes some good.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the only way that I see an Alabama-Ohio State postseason game would be if they made it to the Citrus Bowl, which, to get a little ahead of ourselves, it's probably if Wisconsin beats Michigan in the Big Ten championship, Alabama loses to Auburn. I saw they were down at halftime, and then loses to Georgia again. So I think that would be a little bit of a disappointing end of the season, especially because the Rose Bowl is still an option. They like Pac-12 team at that point. Maybe another rematch with Oregon. I think that might be the best case scenario, just to kind of say, hey, at least we can, get up for this game and show that we should have beat them in the first place. And then maybe this Michigan game wouldn't have been such a big deal, and just in terms of college football playoff positioning or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's really just difficult to kind of say these things, after a loss like this, just because, like I said, 6 hours ago, we were talking about, postseason and college football playoff, those kind of things. And now it's completely out the window, and you're kind of at the mercy of what happens next week on college or conference championship Saturday, and you're sitting at home just watching.
Yeah. Well, this was far from a fun day, that's for sure. And we've got a lot of time to talk about it. The reality is it is November 27th, and the next time that the Ohio State Buckeyes play a football game is going to be either New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, depending on which bowl game they get into. It's pretty darn unlikely that they're going to make the college football playoff. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I certainly think it's unlikely. They need a lot of things to go their way if they're going to continue to play in the playoff. There's no Big Ten championship game next weekend, and that means a lot of time to look at this film and try to figure out how to get better and from our perspective, to dissect a lot of things. And we will begin with that tomorrow morning. Our coach, Tommy Zagorski, will join us as he usually does on Sunday mornings. We'll start our live stream tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock for our What We Learned postgame show, 24 hours after the fact. But in the meantime, Andrew, appreciate your work and your time. And obviously this was not a particularly fun end of the day today, but the Buckeyes' regular season comes to a close with a 42-27 win. Any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's another month and several days before Ohio State will play again. And, this is definitely going to be something that's going to drive them in the offseason. The loss to Clemson in 2019, they just talked about how that was just such a driving force for the entire season. And I will definitely say that, when Ohio State and Michigan meet next November, I definitely think Ohio State will be a lot more ready than they were today for that game.
For Andrew Lind, I'm Brendan Gulick. Good night from the Big House in Ann Arbor. Ohio State losing today 42-27, closing out the regular season with a 10-2 record. Again, please follow us on social media at BuckeyesNow SI on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love it if you followed our YouTube content. You can subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications so you can participate in our conversations just like we had here tonight. We'll be back live tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock with What We Learned. Coach Tommy Zagorski will join me tomorrow morning. Have a good rest of the night. Hang in there, Buckeye Nation. It'll get a little bit better, but this one certainly stings today. Ohio State loses on the road by 2 scores, their first loss to Michigan since 2011.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.